The scout craft goes down in the drowned reach with its thrusters screaming, and the canopy split like an eggshell, and I come up out of the harness with swamp water to my knees, and no signal on any channel. This is not how the survey run was supposed to go. I am 44 years old. I have flown this kind of wreck twice before, and I know within the first 10 minutes that no one is coming for a while. So I do what I have always done. I take stock, I get moving, and I stop feeling sorry for myself. The reach is not empty, though the charts say it should be. Half a kilometer from the wreck, I find drag marks through the reeds, too straight to be an animal, and I follow them because I have nothing better to do, and because some instinct older than training tells me to. What I find at the end of them is a woman crouched in the hollow of a fallen root system, one arm wrapped tight against her ribs, skin the deep clay red of the local stone, dark markings threading down her throat like something scored into her on purpose. Her eyes come up to mine, pale gold, steady even through the pain, and she says something in a language my translator only half catches. The gist of it is, "Go." I don't go. There's a discipline to this line of work that doesn't leave room for walking away from an injured party just because they've told you to, and 30 years in survey craft has worn that discipline into me deep enough that I don't even have to think about it. I crouch instead, slow, hands where she can see them, and I ask if she's hurt. She stares at me like the question doesn't make sense, the way you'd stare at someone asking if water was wet. "You should not be near me," she says, once the translator sorts her words out properly. I am HFY marked. Cursed, my own people put me on this ground to die of it. I look at her arm, clearly broken, and at the burn along her side that's already gone the color of old rust, and I tell her that where I come from, cursed is just a word people use when they don't want to help somebody. She doesn't answer that. She just watches me open my kit and start setting a splint, waiting, I think, for me to change my mind the way everyone else apparently has. I don't change my mind. Her name, once she gives it, is Naira. Not a title, not a house name, just Naira, offered, like she isn't sure she still has the right to the rest of it. I splint the arm, pack the burn, and share out half my ration bar because she hasn't eaten in what turns out to be 3 days, and the whole time she keeps flinching, not from the pain, but like she's bracing for the moment I finally understand what she is, and pull my hands back. She watches me work with a kind of wary arithmetic in her eyes, the look of someone who has learned to price out exactly how long a stranger's decency lasts before it curdles into fear. I've seen that look before, on people who've been handed the short end of a superstition they had no say in. It never sits right with me, so I keep my hands steady on the splint, and I don't flinch at the markings on her throat, and I don't ask her to explain them, because it isn't my business what her own people decided those markings meant. I don't pull my hands back. I've never been much of a believer in curses. I've flown into enough burning wrecks and hauled enough men and women out of worse than this to know that bad luck is usually just bad luck, and good people get handed it same as anyone. So I finish the splint, and I tell her the plan. My wreck's dry side compartment still holds. There's a beacon I can rig by morning, and she's welcome to wait it out with me instead of alone in a root hollow with a storm building on the horizon. She looks at me like I've offered her something she doesn't have a word for. "You do not know what I am," she says again, quieter this time. "I know you're hurt, and you're alone," I tell her. That's enough for me. The storm the horizon promised arrives faster than either of us plans for, and it brings the reach's worst with it. Pale, long-legged things that hunt in the thrash and dark of bad weather, drawn by the noise of my wreck's dying systems. I hear them before I see them, a clicking that carries wrong through wet air, and Naira goes rigid beside me in a way that tells me she knows exactly what's coming. "They will not touch me," she says, and there's no comfort in the way she says it. HFY marked. They know my kind by scent. They will take you instead, to spare themselves my curse. I don't waste breath arguing curses with her a second time. I haul her up under my good arm, get us both into the dry side compartment, and brace the hatch with everything loose in the cabin, while the first of them slams into the hull hard enough to rock it. She's shaking, not from fear alone, I realize, but from the sheer unfamiliar shock of somebody standing between her and the thing her own people taught her to believe she deserved. I put myself at the hatch with a pry bar in one hand and a flare gun in the other, and I hold that line through 3 hours of a storm that never once lets up. And every time one of those things gets a claw through the seam, I put a boot to it, and Naira puts a length of scavenged conduit through the gap right beside me. One-armed, jaw set, not once asking me to protect her alone. Somewhere in the second hour, one of the things gets a claw far enough through the seam to catch my forearm, and Naira is the one who drives the conduit into it before I can even shout, her broken arm braced against her ribs, her good hand steady as a gun sight. She doesn't look at me for thanks. She just resets her grip and watches the seam for the next one, like standing that line is simply what a person does, if only somebody ever gives them the chance to prove it. By the time the reach goes quiet again, gray dawn leaking through the cracked canopy, we're both bleeding in small places, and neither of us is dead, and something in her face has changed. It isn't gratitude exactly, it's closer to disbelief, worn thin enough to let something else through. No one has ever done that, she says, stood at a door for me. Somebody should have a long time ago, I say. She's quiet a long time after that, watching the stormlight change over the swamp, and when she finally speaks again, it isn't about the curse at all. She tells me about the court that named her that way, not because of anything she did, but because her mother died bringing her into the world during a season the priests had already called ill-omened, and it was easier for a grieving house to blame an infant than to grieve. She tells me how the servants used to step around her shadow when she was small, how her tutors kept a careful half-pace of distance she was too young to understand, and too old, later, to forgive. She's carried it every year since, in her own father's eyes most of all, until the day he signed the writ that put her out here to see if the omen would finally finish what it started. He did not even come to the gate, she says. He sent an officer with the writ and a single guard to walk me to the edge of the reach. I kept waiting for him to change his mind. He did not. I tell her I don't put much stock in omens. I tell her what I do put stock in is a person who fights one-armed through a 3-hour siege without once asking to be carried. She looks at me for a long moment, like she's trying to decide whether I mean it, and then, for the first time since I found her, something in her shoulders comes down that had been up the whole time I've known her. The beacon finally catches a relay 2 days later, faint but real, and I know a retrieval skiff will find the wreck inside a week. Naira knows it too. She doesn't ask what happens to her once it does, and I don't pretend I have an answer waiting. What I do instead is simpler. I tell her that whatever her people decided to call her, I never once saw a curse sitting across that hatch from me. I saw somebody who held a line when it mattered, and that's the only mark I plan on remembering. She doesn't say anything to that. She just reaches over, careful of the splint, and closes her good hand around mine, and we sit there in the gray reach morning, waiting for the sky to bring someone, not saying much else, because for the first time in longer than she can count, she doesn't have to.